He was listed as missing in action during the final days of the Vietnam War, presumed dead. His family mourned, held a funeral with an empty casket, and slowly, painfully, tried to piece their lives back together. They had a headstone, they had his medals, but they never had a body. For 40 years, Jack Miller was a ghost, a memory frozen in time as the young man in the photograph on the mantelpiece. But then, a single knock on a quiet suburban door would shatter that reality forever, revealing a secret more incredible and painful than anyone could have ever imagined. Before he was a mystery, Jack Miller was a person. He was a young man from a small town in Ohio, with an easy smile and a protective streak a mile wide. He was a brother to Sarah, a son to Mary, and just months before shipping out, he'd become a husband to his high school sweetheart, Linda. In the grainy home movies and faded photographs, you see a life full of potential. A backyard barbecue, a proud moment in his uniform, a tender kiss goodbye. That potential was severed on March 18, 1972. Jack's unit was on a long-range patrol deep in the jungles near the Cambodian border when they walked into a devastating ambush. In the storm of gunfire and confusion, communication was lost. When the firefight subsided and air support arrived, several men were dead. Jack Miller was not among them. He was simply gone. The official telegram arrived at the Miller family home, its stark, formal language delivering a devastating blow. The Secretary of the Army regrets to inform you. His mother's face crumpled, his sister Sarah screamed, and his young wife Linda collapsed into a chair, the world falling away from her. The Army's investigation concluded he was likely killed in the ambush. His body never recovered. He was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart. For his family, the not knowing was a special kind of torture. They were left with the same unanswerable questions that would haunt them for decades. What really happened to Jack in that dense, unforgiving jungle? Was his end quick, or was it something else? And the most impossible question of all, how could a man simply cease to exist for 40 years? For the family left behind, the years after Jack's disappearance were not a linear progression forward, but a slow, circular orbit around a void. His wife, Linda, described it as living with a ghost, one that haunted the most mundane moments. You'd be at the grocery store and see his favorite brand of beer, or you'd hear a song on the radio from that summer, and it would just knock the wind out of you, she would recall. The world kept spinning, but a part of me was forever stuck on that day in March, waiting for a phone call that never came. You go through the motions, you work, you pay bills, you even laugh again, but there's always this low hum of absence, this constant quiet reminder that a piece of your life is just missing. She tried to move on, eventually remarrying after many years, but the question of Jack was a shadow she learned to live with, a permanent resident in the back of her mind. His sister, Sarah, became the family's archivist and sentinel. She kept his memory burning brightly, ensuring that her own children, who were born long after he vanished, knew the face and the story of their Uncle Jack. She framed his letters, preserved his high school yearbook, and on every birthday and anniversary of his disappearance, she would visit the veteran cemetery. There, nestled amidst rows of identical white headstones, was his. It was a stark marble fact that offered a strange, cold comfort. We had a place to go, Sarah explained. We could lay flowers, we could touch the stone, we could speak his name to the earth. We did everything you're supposed to do. We had a grave, we had a ceremony, we thought we had closure. But it was a performance, really. How can you close a chapter when you don't know how the sentence ends? You're mourning a man, but you're also mourning a story without an ending. In the early years, the family channeled their anguish into action. They joined the growing network of POW MIA families, attending rallies, writing letters to congressmen, and clinging to the electrifying, yet agonizing, hope fueled by sporadic reports of live sightings of American soldiers in Southeast Asia. They would scrutinize grainy photographs, their hearts leaping at any vague resemblance, only to have their hopes dashed time and again. For a long time, hope was the only thing keeping us going, Sarah said. But hope is a heavy burden to carry for decades. It exhausts you. After 10 years, then 20, the fervent belief that he was alive in some prison camp slowly dimmed, replaced by a quieter, more probable grief. You don't stop loving them, you don't stop wondering, but you do, eventually, stop expecting them to walk through the door. The hope didn't die. It just fossilized into a permanent, dull ache. The official record from the Department of Defense was a clinical and frustratingly incomplete document. According to the declassified after-action report, Sergeant John Miller's unit, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 12th Infantry Regiment, was engaged by a numerically superior enemy force at coordinates 11.5 degrees north 106.5 degrees east. The firefight was described as fierce and sustained, resulting in multiple casualties. The last confirmed sighting of Sergeant Miller was by a Private First Class David Chen, who stated he saw Miller providing covering fire as the squad attempted to fall back to a defensive perimeter. In the ensuing chaos, with smoke and vegetation obscuring the battlefield, Miller's position was overrun. When a relief force secured the area hours later, they recovered 2 confirmed Kia, but found no sign of Miller, alive or dead. The official conclusion was Kia BNR, killed in action, body not recovered. To the military, it was a tragic but statistically common outcome of jungle warfare. A young sergeant had fallen bravely, and the land itself had swallowed him. This official verdict, however, did little to silence the whispers and theories that swirled for years, both within the family and among his fellow veterans. The lack of a body was a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. The most persistent and hopeful theory was that he had been captured. Perhaps he was wounded and scooped up by the Viet Cong, taken to a hidden prison camp deep in the jungle that was never discovered by American forces. This was the theory the family clung to in the beginning, the narrative that powered the POW, MIA movement. A darker, more painful possibility was that he had survived captivity for years, only to perish from disease or mistreatment, his fate unknown to his captors. Then there was the most taboo and complex theory of all, one rarely spoken aloud by the family but often speculated about by outsiders: desertion. Had the terror of the ambience, the sheer brutality of the war, broken something in him? Did he, in that moment of chaos, make a conscious choice to walk away, to disappear into the jungle and forge a new identity, leaving his old life behind? It was a theory that provoked a deep conflict, the horror of him being a traitor versus the faint, desperate hope that it meant he could still, somehow, be alive. Each theory painted a radically different picture of the man, the heroic prisoner, the tragic victim, or the broken deserter, and without proof, the family was left to wrestle with all these potential ghosts. The day began with the same ordinary rhythm that had defined Sarah's life for years. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across her quiet suburban street. The knock on the door was firm, polite, but insistent. When she opened it, she found 2 figures silhouetted against the light. One was a woman with a kind, official demeanor, who introduced herself as a social worker from the county. The other was a man. He was stooped and weathered, his face a roadmap of deep lines and a lifetime of hardship she couldn't begin to fathom. His clothes were worn, and he held himself with a tentative fragility that spoke of a profound weariness. He looked decades older than his years, but in the way ancient mountains look old, not decayed, but enduring. Sarah's first thought was that it was a veteran down on his luck, perhaps seeking help from a fellow military family. But then the man's eyes, a piercing, familiar blue that seemed to belong to a different face entirely, met hers. He took a shallow breath, and in a voice raspy from disuse, he spoke a name that had not been spoken in that house for a very long time. "I'm looking for Sarah Miller," he said. "My name is John. John Miller. I think I'm your brother." The words hung in the air, nonsensical and world-shattering. Sarah recalled a wave of pure, vertiginous disbelief, as if the foundation of her house, her life, her very memory, had suddenly turned to sand. Her mind raced through a frantic checklist of denial. This was a cruel joke, a scam, a trick. Her brother was dead. She had buried him, she visited his headstone. She told the man, her voice tight with a mixture of panic and anger, that her brother had died in the war. But the man didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke of things that no stranger could possibly know. He described the secret hiding spot in the old oak tree in their childhood backyard where they'd stash a cigar box of treasures. He hummed a few bars of a silly, nonsensical song their father used to sing while washing the car. And then he looked at her, his eyes glistening, and said, "You had a kitten named Butterscotch. You were 6. You cried for a week when he ran away." That was the detail that broke through the wall of impossibility. It was a private childhood grief she had never shared with anyone, a memory locked away in a vault that only she and one other person in the world had access to. The air left her lungs. The world narrowed to the face of this ancient stranger. "I looked at this old man, this ghost," Sarah said, her own voice breaking at the memory, "and I was looking for my vibrant young brother. I was searching for a face I hadn't seen in 40 years. And then he gave a small, hesitant smile, a mere echo of the one I remembered, but it was enough. It was in the eyes. After a moment, past all the lines and the years and the impossible history, I saw him. I saw my brother." The story that emerged in the following days and weeks was a fractured, painful narrative, pieced together like shards of broken pottery. Jack, or the man he had become, explained that during the ambush, a rocket-propelled grenade had exploded near his position. The concussive blast threw him into a ravine, causing a severe head injury and shrapnel wounds in his leg. He remembered the heat, the deafening noise, and then nothing but a vague, dreamlike haze of being found by an elderly villager who tended to his wounds with local herbs and kept him hidden. When his body healed, his mind had not. The trauma had severed his connection to his past. He knew how to speak, how to eat, how to work, but the file cabinet of his personal history, his name, his family, his life as a soldier, was locked away, inaccessible. He lived for years as a laborer in remote villages, a quiet, solitary figure who asked no questions and offered no stories. He was a man without a history, a blank slate, known only by the simple nickname the villagers gave him. For decades, this amnesiac existence was his entire world. The war ended, years turned into decades, and still, the door to his past remained shut. The trigger, he explained, was another injury in his late 60s, a fall from a ladder that resulted in another blow to the head. While the physical effects were minor, the neurological impact was profound. It was as if the second blow had jostled the lock on that sealed room in his mind. Fragments began to return, first in his dreams. Images of a porch swing, the smell of his mother's perfume, the sound of his sister's laughter. Then, during the day, flashes of memory would ambush him. A football game, the weight of a rifle, the feel of his army dog tags against his chest. The process was terrifying and disorienting. The man he had been for 40 years began to crumble, and a ghost started to take solid form within him. It took him another 2 years, working with a doctor in a nearby city and a patient social worker, to piece the fragments together into a coherent identity, to find the courage and the means to cross an ocean and knock on a door that, in his mind, he had left only a few years prior. He was returning from a war that had been over for generations, a living relic stepping out of the fog of history, carrying the weight of 4 lost decades on his stooped shoulders. The initial dizzying euphoria of Jack's return slowly settled into a more complicated, bittersweet reality. The joy of having him back, of hearing his voice in the kitchen, of being able to touch his hand, was profound and very real. But it was a joy perpetually shadowed by a deep, unspoken grief for everything that had been lost in the chasm of those 40 years. There was the crushing weight of specific, irreversible absences. Jack had to be taken to the cemetery, not to his own headstone, but to the graves of his parents. He stood in silence before the 2 markers, learning for the first time that his fiercely proud father had died of a heart attack in 1985, and that his mother had passed from cancer in 1998, never relinquishing the hope that her son was alive. He had missed their final years, their illnesses, their funerals. He learned that the young wife he left behind had built a new life, a fact that brought him a strange mix of sorrow for what was and a genuine relief that she had not been left alone. The life he was supposed to have lived, the children he might have raised, the career he might have built, the simple daily memories of a shared life, had all unfolded without him, and the realization was a constant, private anguish. Reintegrating into a world that had leaped forward without him was a monumental struggle. The digital age was a particular source of confusion and frustration. The concept of a smartphone was alien to him. The internet a vast, intimidating universe of information he didn't know how to navigate. The pace of life, the constant connectivity, the noise of the modern world was often overwhelming for a man who had spent decades in the relative quiet of manual labor and simple routines. More complex than the technology were the family dynamics. While Sarah was his anchor, her own children and grandchildren were strangers who knew him only as a story, a legend from a black and white photograph. They were polite, even curious, but a natural, easy familiarity was hard to forge across such a vast generational and experiential divide. Jack himself was a quiet presence, often retreating into silence. When asked what the hardest part was, he once reflected, his gaze distant, "It's all the ghosts. The ones in the pictures on the wall. My mom, my dad. The ones from the jungle, the boys who didn't get to come home. But it's seeing my little sister, who I remember teaching to ride a bike, now a grandmother with a lifetime of wisdom I wasn't here to share. It's realizing that the world you knew is a museum piece, and you're a visitor in your own life." For the Miller family, Jack's return was not a conclusion, but the beginning of a new, unexpected chapter, one they were still learning how to write. The decades of certainty, however painful, were gone, replaced by a complex and often messy present. Sarah described it as a miracle with thorns. "You can't just get 40 years back," she said. "It's not a movie where the credits roll after the hug. There's trauma, there's adjustment, there's a whole person who lived a life we know nothing about. But despite all that, it's a second chance we never ever thought was possible. We get to hear his laugh in the present tense. We get to share a meal, to argue about the news, to just be in the same room. It's a gift so strange and so profound, it defies description. It hasn't erased the pain of the past, but it has given us a new future to build together, and for that, we are endlessly grateful." Jack's story ultimately transcends the specifics of one man or one war. It becomes a powerful, living testament to the unyielding and often mysterious nature of the human spirit. It forces us to question our very understanding of loss and closure. We erect headstones and hold services to make peace with the finality of death. But what happens when that finality is proven to be an illusion? His journey is a reminder that the maps we draw of our lives are often incomplete, that there can be undiscovered countries even after the story seems long ended. It speaks to the resilience of identity, that even when shattered and buried for a lifetime, the core of who we are can still fight its way back to the light. In a world that often feels like all the mysteries have been solved, the story of the soldier who vanished and came back challenges our assumptions about time, memory, and the enduring bonds of family. It is a testament to the fact that sometimes, against all conceivable odds, the lost can be found, and that even the most profound silence can, after 40 years, finally be broken. John Jack Miller's Long War, the one that began in a fiery ambush in a distant jungle and continued for decades in the silent, bewildering battlefield of his own mind, was finally over. The battle to remember, the struggle to return, the arduous journey to find his way back to a world that had long since mourned him. All of it had reached its conclusion not with a final shot, but with a quiet embrace on a peaceful suburban porch. He came home, not as the strapping young sergeant who had kissed his wife goodbye in 1972, but as a man weathered by time and tragedy, his body and spirit bearing the invisible wounds of a 40-year odyssey. His presence stands as a living testament to the fact that the human story is capable of the most astonishing twists, that resilience can wear the face of a quiet, elderly man, and that some narratives refuse to be bound by our conventional understanding of time and finality. Some stories simply do not have an ending until the very last page is turned, and for Jack Miller, that page was turned not in the jungles of Southeast Asia, but in the heart of his own family, where he finally, truly came home. This incredible story of loss and return is one that challenges our perception of what is possible. We want to hear what you think. What part of Jack's journey resonated most deeply with you? Was it the family's enduring hope, the mystery of his disappearance, or the profound complexity of his homecoming? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Your perspective adds another layer to this remarkable human tale. And if you have your own story, perhaps of a loved one who is lost and found, or a family mystery that remains unsolved, we encourage you to share it with our community. These stories connect us through the shared experiences of grief, hope, and resilience. If you were moved by this account and want to explore more narratives that delve into the depths of mystery, history, and the unbreakable human spirit, please subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you ensure you won't miss our next journey into the stories that remind us of the extraordinary threads woven into the fabric of ordinary life.